I am Dr. Shipra Dua, Associate Professor, Department of Journalism and Mass Communication from Jagannath University, Jaipur, Rajasthan. Elements of radio program. Here we are talking about writing for radio, so it is important to know about elements of radio program. Every radio program is in fact a message to the listeners. If this message is communicated to and understood by the listeners and also appreciated, then that radio writing can be considered effective and fruitful. A message through radio or any other medium have certain codes or form the sender of the message, and one who receives the message decodes them. Let's understand this by some simple examples. When we talk to each other, then the codes which work to deliver the message are 1. Spoken words, 1. Spoken words, 2nd. Facial expressions, 3rd is body gestures such as hand movements. The person to whom we are talking decodes understands these. For instance, just by staring sternly, a father can convey his anger or disapproval to his child. A professor can stop a student coming late to class just by a movement of his hand. In the print medium, books, magazines, newspaper, etc., written words, pictures, tables, graphs, etc., work as codes to take the message to the readers. Now let's try to understand the codes which work for radio message. The basic elements which create the language of radio. There are four basic elements which constitute radio programs. Whenever we listen to any program or any radio station from any part of the world, we shall hear only these four: spoken words, sound effects, music, pause or silence. Words are the most important part of any radio program. These words are different from printed words because they reach a listener through a human voice and thus are spoken words. Words of radio form a double code. One, their own meaning embellished by the beauty of language, and second, the voice in which these are rendered. Thus, the quality of voice as well as delivery of words can make the language of radio more effective depending on the style of presentation. In brief, we may say that words used in radio program are spoken words. These give a feel of human presence. These also reflect some aspects of the speaker's personality. These may tell us about the broadcast stations or even the country from where the broadcast is coming. Because their radio is a blind medium with no visuals, appropriate sound effects enrich the visuals created by spoken words in listener's mind. Radio plays and documentaries take immense help from suitable sound effects. Music also helps in developing the language of radio. For example, a musical piece of just 30 seconds, which is played as a signature tune, identifies not only the broadcast institution but also the individual program. Similarly, the effect of an opening or dropping curtain in a theater is achieved by fade in or fade out of music in a radio drama. The background music in a radio drama is helpful in making a scene lively. Radio is a sound medium, but absence of any sound is also an important part of language of radio. This really is the most interesting contradiction that no radio program can be imagined without natural and even deliberate pauses or silences. Pause is an integral part of the grammar of radio. The use of comma or full stop in print is replaced by that of pause in radio. Principles of scripting for radio programs. Any radio script can be effective on the basis of its content, which depends on the research about the subject. Let us take an example. If a talk on the historical topic that can be Red Fort in Delhi mentions about the fact that the road opposite Red Fort going to Chandni Chowk used to be a canal during the Mughal period. used to be canon during Mughal period will certainly attract the attention of the listener. Listeners may like this information, which might be hit her to known unknown to them that the road, which is now brimming with heavy traffic, is the place where people used to enjoy bloating in the moonlight. To find out unknown rare facts on a given subject, we should consult books on the subject, go through magazines for relevant articles, consult subject matter specialist, visit a particular place or tourist spot or his- historical building concerning the subject, and so on. Formats like documentaries require deep and detailed research. But even for writing a radio talk of 5 minutes, the importance of research cannot be ignored. If we write for radio without proper knowledge of facts, it will only be a play of words, which would be unethical and will almost mean cheating the listeners. Identify the listeners. After learning about the broad categories of programs, radio writers should also know about the programs for special audience. Whenever we plan a program and write a script for it, we have to keep in mind the listeners of that program. Certain programs are for all the listeners, but many are targeted at special groups of audience. When we write for a particular audience group, we also need to identify various subgroups and their particular requirements. For example, radio stations have programs for women, but all women may not have identical interest. A housewife may have some requirements, but a working woman may have different requirements. Similarly, needs of an unemployed youth would be different from those of young person holding a good job. Basic rules of radio script. Use simple words, easier, simple, and common words should be used. We need to remember how we talk, not how we write. Radio is a medium whose least common denominator audience are the layman. Using simple words is really important. A list of few radio appropriate words in English is provided below. I'm sure you can find such equivalents in your own mother tongue too. Use short words. Sentences should avoid conjunctions as much as possible. The sentences should ideally be of length appropriate for taking. Remember, unlike print, we cannot go back to the sentence and rehear it. One idea per sentence. One sentence should carry one idea. Never clutter one sentence with too many ideas. Avoid sound clashes. Read your copy aloud for awkward sounds. Be sparing in use of s, th, and ing sounds. Avoid work like thrust, wrist, and frisk, all of which are difficult to pronounce. Use present tense. This is especially relevant for news bulletins, particularly the headlines, for conveying the immediacy and to drive home the urgency of news. Use of present tense is a cardinal rule. For example, the monsoon session has commenced. We have responsibility for quality. The Prime Minister has inaugurated the project. Use active voice. Script should be written in active voice. For example, a new governor was appointed by the president. 30, uh, 10 shops were destroyed by a fire. A fire destroyed. A meeting will be held by the teachers. Another example you can see on the screen. They are the example that we should use present tense mostly in the script. Writing for links and announcements. Announcers have been the traditional identity of radio stations, particularly in All India Radio. Sometimes, by just listening to a voice, you can say which air station you are tuned to. The broad general category where all presenters have to start is the announcers category. Announcers generally announce all the important information relating to the public, including program details, time, commercials, public interest messages, and sometimes weather reports. An announcer essentially introduces the broadcast of a particular program item with all its necessary details. These details vary as per the nature and genre of the program. For instance, if it is a talk, then these details include the subject or the title of the talk, the name of the talker, the person delivering the talk, and a very short and crisp introduction of the talker. If it is an interview, then the announcer has to tell the listeners about the subject or theme, the name of the expert or interviewee, and also the name and a shorter introduction of the interviewer. If it is a discussion, then there ought to be more than two participants and moderator who need to be introduced along with the subject. Other genres like poetry recitation, short stories, features, and documentaries, radio drama, magazines, commentaries, etc., almost all have a little and a cast of performances, as well as producers, editors, voiceover artists, and so on to be announced by the announcer. Radio stations broadcast music programs of great variety such as Hindustani or Carnatic classical music, light classical music, light music, folk music, western music, and of course the highly popular film music. These also have a galaxy of performers in different roles and capacities. The announcer has to announce most of such names. All names do not have to be announced right at the beginning, but some major names are required to be announced. However, after the main program has been broadcast, all names have to be announced. Announcer's task is not confined to just announcing the names of the performers or participants. It also involves offering the listeners an insight into the program in a way that makes the listener curious about the program. Announcements are brief and clear messages to provide information of the station's name, which frequency the listener is tuned into, the time, day, and date, and which program or musical number one is going to listen to. Traditionally, the flow of such announcements on radio used to be in an impressive but formal monotone. The comparing was informal and relaxed. Comparing essentially is an informal, intimate, and conversational style of announcement. In All India radio stations, there are compares for such audience programs such as programs for women, youth, children, farmers, industrial workers, defense personnel, etc. These announcers speak in the language or dialect with the tone and style suited to that particular target audience. As and when required, they help in some broadcast related activities, also like scheduling, editing, etc. Successful announcers are usually quite popular with their listeners and occasionally make public appearances to promote special events. As has been mentioned, announcers also need strong writing skills because they normally write their own material. In addition, the announcer should be able to improvise all or some part of the show. It is crucial that an announcer has the temperament to work under tight deadlines. Sometimes some of the announcements have some peculiar names of people, places, procedures, etc. These announcements need to be pre-written and properly rehearsed in advance before going to broadcast. Thank you.